Hi, in this video I'm going to cover the endgame between Fabiano Caruana and Ray Robson from round 7 of US Championship. And in this position, White played King e3. Before we continue, let's talk about this position first. White has a bishop pair, but the material is reduced. And also, White has a potential target on h6. Pawns are on dark squares on the king side, and Black can only defend it by his knight and his king. So he doesn't want to bring his knight back to open up this diagonal for the bishop. So he wants to keep this diagonal clogged, and he plays king e5. Also, it was possible to play knight e6, but Black preferred to keep this knight active on f4 because maybe he wants to put some pressure on h4. But like I said, he first of all he wants to keep this bishop closed. And here White played bishop e1, trying to find a better place for his bishop, to transfer it to c3 or b4, and to attack on h6 via g7. Here it was not possible to capture an f4. It would even lead to a worse position for White, because after gf, king f3, now Black would start creating a passed pawn on the queen side. And you can see that if White tries to play something like h4, g5 to create a passed pawn himself, then he would run into this, takes, and bishop h5. Maybe not immediately, but his e4 pawn is going to hang, because after king f2, Black would play c4, and now he would have lots of trouble defending his e4 pawn, because if he tries by playing bishop g2, then Black would use the fact that bishop is not on f1, and he would push b4, and next c3 is going to be played. So taking on f4 wasn't an option, at least not for a win. So he plays bishop e1, like I said, to transfer his bishop to a better place, to c3, so he can attack on h6. Now he goes back because he wants to control the g7 square, from where would this bishop attack the pawn on h6. Black just improves his bishop, and now Black plays bishop g6. It's a normal move, nothing wrong with this, but I prefer a move c5, which would gain some space on the queen side, and like you will see in the game, it stops White pawns from getting forward. Because in the game, what happened was that White pushed his pawn to a4, b4, a5, and they kind of neutralized this pawn majority from Black. And I think once c5 comes, also it's useful to block this with knight d4 in this position. And if he goes back, then you go back to e6. And it's useful to mention that the bishop ending after bishop e6 is a dead draw, because it's an opposite color bishop ending, and even if you somehow manage to get the g5 pawn or h6, it should be a draw, because of the nature of opposite color bishops ending. And also it's tough to to hold these pawns because they're on the light squares, and you can always push h5 to provoke weakness on g4. For example, if he plays bishop c3, you can first play h5, and if he does king f3, you can take, and in case of king g4, then you play bishop g6. And now if he takes on g5, then you take on e4, and this ending is a dead draw. Because you can purely focus on stopping this h3 pawn. And if he tries something like e5, let's say, then you have bishop f5. And now if king takes bishop h3, and this is a draw. And if you go to g3, then you simply wait, play b5, and if he attacks with bishop d2, then you take this pawn, and now you can leave this bishop protecting this diagonal, and you can focus on the queenside pawns. Okay, so here bishop g6 was played. Let's get back to the game. Finally. And now after bishop g6, like I said, white is expanding on the queen side and trying to neutralize this pawn majority of blacks. Black plays a6. Here, if black takes on e4, it's a big mistake because he has a check, and after king d6, bishop is undefended. So he plays a6. White goes a4. Black goes knight f4, and now bishop c3. Black plays the only move, and now white attacks the pawn on h6. Black has to go with h5, because if he takes on h6, I think that after bishop h6, he's just losing another pawn on g5, because next move of white's is bishop f1, kicking the knight away and taking on g5. So let's say I play king e5, he goes bishop f1, and after knight f4, this is well, maybe it's not such a big problem, because you can take on e4, but still you have a g pawn you have to worry about. It's not ideal. So he plays h5, trying to liquidate pawns on the king side, and also to create a target on g4. He goes back, and now they exchange, and he goes back to e6. And now white plays a very clever move. He plays bishop f6, trying to disconnect the king from the king side, because now the knight cannot move because of the g5 pawn. And if black tries something like king d7, like in the game, and here, I think that now after king e8, he would just play bishop c4, and he would need to go back, because if you try king f7, then this is a free pawn. So black's king is doomed to the center and the queen side for now. White played a5, and now he plays king d6. Bishop c4 and king d7. Black is not afraid of reaching the bishop ending and losing the g5 pawn, because like I said, the nature of the ending is such that you cannot win as white, even with 2 pawns up. White plays bishop d5, and now black plays c6. Here b6 would be a huge mistake, because white had b5, and now he's creating a passed pawn on the A file. Let's say he plays AB5, you can go A6 and just keep pushing your pawn, because the bishop is disabling the king to reach the B7 square. Also, if you play knight C5, then white has an elegant solution, bishop D4, and after AB5 now, you take on C5, and when he takes back, then A6 just wins the game. So black is more or less forced to play C6 to defend B7 pawn. And white goes back to C6, to C4. If he takes on E6, then black takes, and if bishop G5, like I told before, black is just going to hold this position, and let me show you one variation which proves that. Let's say I try something like king d4 to get into the queenside pawns. Then black has a very nice solution in giving up the second pawn, and after bc, because if you play king c5, then black has bishop c6, and we have something similar like in the game. Black goes back, and you will see what happens next. It doesn't matter if it's bc or king c, but let's try bc. Then black goes bishop c6, and if bishop d2, trying to make this g pawn free, now black is just waiting. King f6, king e3, and now bishop d7. And now if king gets active, you just wait, king e6. And if he tries to get active with king g5, then you have king e5 taking the pawn, and this is a draw. If bishop c3, then bishop c6. You're trying to provoke e5, after which you switch to other diagonal. You play bishop a4, and after king g5, bishop d1. You don't allow white to go to h6, because he would lose g4 pawn. The reason why it's important to keep the king from h6 is because if you get to h6, white can push his g pawn, and now it would not be so easy to hold this. But with bishop d1, you're just holding the position, and if king h5, you just wait with bishop e2. And once he pushes g5, now this is a barrier. There's no way to make a progress, and it's simply a draw. So for that reason, Fabiano plays bishop c4, doesn't capture and transferred into the drawn ending. Black is just waiting, and now we have a couple of moves which don't mean anything. They're just shuffling around to gain some time. Let me just go through them. We basically had the same position twice, and they just shuffle their pieces around. And I'm going to stop when something meaningful happens. So Fabiano is just probing, testing black. And now he plays bishop c5, which was interesting because in this position, black played king g7. If he took on c5, that would be also okay for black. But it seems that it's putting this position to a risk, because you see those two pawns on the queen side completely hold these 3 pawns. And basically white has an extra pawn, and that's maybe what drew away Ray Robson from reaching this ending. But after king e7, king e3, bishop f7, and after this, the only way to continue is to play king d4 to stop black's king to reach e5. And now after bishop a2, e5, king e6. Now black has to be careful not to lose his b7 pawn. And also not to allow white's king to enter to f5. Because after that happens, it's over, because you lose on g5 and you cannot hold 2 pawns like in the previous ending, because this is the same color bishops. After king e7, bishop f5, and now it's important to keep the c8 defended. And now if white tries with e6, then you go back to e7. And after king e5, just bishop d5. And now a very nice resource in this position is after bishop d3, black has bishop f3. And now you don't even care about king getting to the g5 pawn, because after king f5, you can take on g4 and take on e6. And now no matter what you do, you're losing both your pawns. Let's say you take on g5, and now king d5, and he's even picking up the a5 pawn. After king a6, king a5, king c7, this is a draw, because now black is forced to give up one of his pawns, and bishop versus 2 pawns is a draw. But instead of this is going to be a long game. Instead of this, he played king g7, and white answered with king g8. Still, I think it's knight c5 was perfectly normal, but he waits. Bishop c4, bishop f7, and now bishop e7. But still, he's not going to take on e6, because the ending is still a draw. Now he pushes his pawn, maybe because of the 50 move rule, I don't know. King g8, and now they still shuffle. But now he puts his bishop on f5. He wants to create some potential threats on via c8. So the knight still cannot move anywhere, and now king g7 was played. And now he's just improving his king. And now it would be bad for black to move from e6, because now the king would also be able to penetrate to b6 via c5. And he plays king g8 here. And now Fabiano does the only thing that makes him that gives him a chance to win this game. He plays bishop g5. The idea behind this is to deflect the knight from e6, so he can enter with his king. Now black plays bishop d5, which is fine. And now after bishop c8, black makes a huge mistake, and he plays knight e6. Knight e4 here was saving the game, because it's keeping d6, which we will see in the game. d6 was a key square to hold in this position, because now if he goes back to d4, then black can repeat with knight g5, and the threat is knight e6. So white has to repeat with king c5, and we would just have this position again, and it's a draw. And if he tries after knight e4, if he tries king b6, then we have this nice move c5, and after bc, then king gets closer. And if bishop b7, you exchange everything, and you play knight c5, and the idea is that after king b6, you capture the e pawn, and the plan is this: knight takes care of the a pawn, and king takes care of the g pawn. So if you try, let's say, something like this, king cannot do anything because, oh sorry, go here better, and it's just a simple draw. And also here, if he tries a6, then knight c5 is taking a draw because you take the pawn, and after a couple of more moves, it's a dead draw. But in the game, black played knight e6, after which king d6 was a good move, and now king f7 has to be played. Knight d8 also doesn't make any difference because you can even push e6 in that case. Knight d8, e6, and e7 is coming next, and black is helpless because his knight is on the rim, and all his pawns are disturbing his activity. So he plays the logical move king f7, but now all the pawns start to fall. Bishop b7, black plays bishop c4, and even c6 is hanging. Now black goes knight d4, trying to get active to attack some pawns, but now black is just simply exchanging bishops, after which there is just too much job to handle, too many problems. There's this e and g pawn, and also a potential passed pawn on the queen side because of this majority on the queen side, 2 versus 1. So he goes back trying to block, but now we have g5, and on king e7, g6. King alone cannot handle those 2 pawns really well, so black is trying something else, but now white creates a passed pawn on the a file, and this is simply a winning position. Also here, I think also king c6 is doing a good job, cutting the knight from reaching the a pawn. But I think almost everything is winning here. So Fabi played king c4, trying to kick this knight even further, and now he pushes. After which, if he takes on e5, it doesn't change a thing because now white plays a7. He wanted to create a chance for a fork. He plays knight f4, and on g7 he came closer, and now he wants to get a fork in case he promotes on a8. Then this would be a draw because knight c7, king c6. Knight would get back to b6, and after you capture on g7, it's a complete draw. But here Fabiano promotes first with check. But he promotes bishop just for the lulz, just for fun. And now the point is that after he takes, and in this position Ray Robson resigned normally. So the point is that once he takes on g8, now the promotion is with check, and there's no knight c7 fork. And also he's losing his knight, but that's not important even without losing that knight, it's winning. That was a long game and very, 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 very long and very, very instructive. Black defended for so long, but he couldn't. He made one mistake, and it was all over. Thank you for watching, and bye.